Listen closely, because this is not the story of a monster. This is the story of a hero who was loved too much, trusted too deeply, and fell farther than any soul in the history of mankind. Long before the Imperium burned, before brother turned against brother, before the galaxy screamed beneath the weight of betrayal, there was Horus Lupercal, the brightest star in the Emperor's grand design. He was not born like ordinary men. Horus was forged. When the Emperor of mankind scattered his 20 Primarch sons across the galaxy, ripped from his grasp by the dark gods of the warp, Horus vanished into the void like the others. But fate, cruel and precise, placed him on the brutal world of Chthoniya. Chthoniya was a dying planet. Its surface was stripped bare by industry, its people hardened by endless gang wars and underground hive cities. Survival there required strength, loyalty, and ruthlessness. It was here that Horus learned to lead, not through fear, but through respect. He rose quickly, too quickly. By the time the Emperor found him, Horus was already a king among killers, a warlord whose name inspired loyalty and terror in equal measure. When the Emperor revealed himself, clad in golden armor and radiant power, Horus did not kneel out of fear. He knelt because he recognized his father. And in that moment, something rare happened. The Emperor smiled. Unlike many of his brothers, Horus bonded instantly with the master of mankind. Where others felt awe or resentment, Horus felt belonging. He was the first Primarch rediscovered, and that mattered more than anyone realized. The Emperor took Horus to the stars and gave him a legion, the Luna Wolves, later renamed the Sons of Horus. Under Horus's command, they became legendary. World after world fell not through extermination, but through compliance. Horus understood humanity. He negotiated when possible, conquered when necessary, and inspired absolute loyalty from his warriors. His legion adored him, not as a god, but as a brother, a leader, a symbol of hope. Other Primarchs noticed. Some admired him, some envied him, some hated him, but none could deny it. Horus was the best of them. He laughed when others brooded. He fought beside his sons rather than above them. He spoke plainly, joked freely, and carried the unbearable weight of conquest with a smile that convinced others everything would be all right. Even the Emperor trusted him more than the rest. And then, the unthinkable happened. As the Great Crusade thundered across the galaxy, the Emperor made a decision that would doom mankind. He returned to Terra, without explanation, without comfort, without Horus. In his place, the Emperor named a Warmaster, supreme commander of all Imperial forces. That Warmaster was Horus Lupercal. The honor was immense. The burden was unbearable. For the first time, Horus stood not beside his father, but in his shadow. And as the Emperor vanished behind the gates of the Imperial Palace, something subtle began to change inside the favored son. Doubt, not anger, not hatred, just a quiet, gnawing question. Why was I left behind? That question would echo through the warp itself, and the gods were listening. Power does not corrupt instantly. First, it isolates. And before Horus Lupercal ever betrayed the Imperium, he was left alone to carry the weight of it. When the Emperor named Horus Warmaster, the galaxy celebrated. The legions cheered, the remembrancers wrote poetry. Worlds surrendered at the mere sound of his name. But beneath the ceremony, beneath the banners and salutes, Horus felt something unfamiliar tighten around his heart. Responsibility. He now commanded not one legion, but all of them. 18 Primarchs, millions of space marines, countless human armies, entire fleets, entire worlds, and yet the Emperor was gone. No guidance, no counsel, no explanations, only silence. Horus tried to be the Warmaster the Emperor would have wanted. He ruled from the flagship vengeful spirit, holding councils of war, mediating disputes between brothers whose rivalries burned hotter than any enemy. Rogel Dorn was cold and rigid. Guilliman spoke of governance and law. Angron snarled at anything resembling restraint. Mortarion glared with barely concealed resentment. And through it all, Horus smiled. He listened. He compromised. He carried the weight so others would not have to. But cracks were forming. The Great Crusade had always promised unity, that humanity would be brought together, liberated from superstition, ignorance, and alien domination. Yet as Warmaster, Horus began to see the truth behind compliance reports. Worlds brought into the Imperium were stripped of their cultures, their rulers executed, their religions outlawed, and when they resisted, they burned. One campaign haunted him above all others: the 63rd Expeditionary Fleet, the world of 6319. The planet had once been compliant, but while the Imperium's armies marched elsewhere, the people rebelled. They rejected imperial rule, declaring independence. To Horus, it seemed reasonable. They had been abandoned, forgotten. So he did something unthinkable. He chose negotiation. Horus met their leaders personally. He listened to their grievances. He promised reforms, reduced tithes, autonomy under imperial oversight. For a moment, peace seemed possible. Then the word-bearers arrived. Lorgar's sons did not negotiate. They exterminated. Cities were reduced to ash. Millions died screaming beneath orbital bombardment. The rebellion ended not with compliance, but with annihilation. Horus was furious. This was not the Imperium he believed in. When he confronted the word-bearers, they cited the Emperor's will: absolute compliance, no compromise, no mercy. And for the first time, Horus asked a dangerous question. Had the Emperor lied to him? That doubt grew when the Council of Terra began interfering with his commands. Civilian administrators, men and women who had never seen war, overruled battlefield decisions made by Primarchs. Horus, the Warmaster of all imperial armies, was being second-guessed by bureaucrats. And the Emperor said nothing. Worse still, Horus felt his brothers drifting away. Some resented his authority. Some obeyed, but without warmth. Some, like Fulgrim and Lorgar, smiled too eagerly, hiding motives Horus could not yet see. Only a few remained truly close. Sanguinius, noble, compassionate, hiding his own terrible secret. Horus trusted him absolutely, Jagatai Khan, distant but honest. He asked questions, not favors, but trust, like loyalty, is fragile. The galaxy sensed Horus's uncertainty, and the warp fed on it. Whispers began at the edge of perception, never clear, never direct. Just thoughts that did not feel entirely his own. Why do you kneel to a father who abandons you? Why does the Imperium worship a man who denies gods? Why must you bear the burden alone? Horus dismissed them as stress, fatigue, the cost of command. Then came Davin, a backwater world, a routine compliance action, the kind of mission that should have meant nothing. But fate had marked it. As Horus prepared to lead the assault personally, against the advice of his captains, no one noticed the quiet satisfaction on Erebus's face. The trap was already set, and Horus Lupercal, Warmaster of mankind, stepped willingly into it. History did not break when Horus chose betrayal. It broke when he chose to fight. One last time, like a hero. The world of Davin looked harmless from orbit. A green planet, scarred by ancient wars, but quiet now. Its rulers had once sworn loyalty to the Imperium, only to fall into rebellion under the influence of a mysterious warrior lord named Yugen Temba, a former Imperial commander thought long dead. Horus should have ordered extermination. That would have been the efficient choice. The Warmaster had fleets, titans, entire legions at his command. Instead, he chose to lead from the front, because that was who Horus Lupercal was. Against the advice of his Mournival, Abaddon, Aximand, Torgadon, and Loken, Horus descended to Davin's surface. He wanted answers. He wanted to face the traitor who had once served the Imperium. What Horus did not know was that Davin was already claimed. The air was thick with something foul, not poison, but wrongness. The ground pulsed with unnatural growths. Ruins twisted into impossible shapes. The warp pressed close like a predator holding its breath. The sons of Horus advanced through the corrupted city, bolters roaring, chain blades screaming. Resistance was fierce but disorganized. The rebels fought with fanatical devotion, chanting words that scraped against the mind. Then Horus saw him, Yugen Temba, once human, once loyal, now something else. Temba stood tall, swollen with unnatural power, his flesh warped, his eyes burning with devotion to dark gods Horus did not yet understand. In his hand, he carried a blade that seemed to drink the light around it. The Anatham, a weapon older than the Imperium. A blade forged not to kill the body, but to wound the soul. Horus did not hesitate. He charged. The duel was brutal and brief. Horus was a Primarch, a demigod of war. He struck Temba down with contemptuous force, shattering the traitor's body, but victory lasted only a heartbeat. With his final breath, Temba lunged. The anatheme pierced Horus's side. The blade did not glow. It did not explode. It simply cut. Horus fell. His sons screamed his name as the Warmaster collapsed, blood spilling across the corrupted stone. Apothecaries rushed forward, but their instruments failed. The wound refused to close. The flesh blackened. The corruption spread. For the first time since his creation, Horus Lupercal was dying. They rushed him back to the vengeful spirit, sealing the chamber, calling upon every fragment of Imperial science. Nothing worked. The blade's poison was not physical. It was warp-born. The Legion panicked. Without Horus, the Great Crusade would fracture. The Imperium would collapse. That was when Erebus spoke. First chaplain of the word-bearers, soft-voiced, reverent, trusted, he offered a solution. On Davin, he said, there were ancient rituals, old, forbidden, but powerful. The planet's lodge priests could heal what science could not. It was dangerous, unorthodox, but Horus was dying. Desperation breeds heresy. They took him back to the surface, to a serpent-shaped temple hidden beneath the corrupted soil. The sons of Horus stood guard as Erebus and the lodge priests began their rites, and as Horus's body lay broken, his mind fell. He dreamed. Or perhaps he awakened. Horus found himself walking through visions, carefully crafted lies woven with fragments of truth. He saw the future Imperium, a god-emperor worshipped as a tyrant, humanity enslaved beneath endless war, his brothers dead or forgotten. He saw statues of the emperor towering over ruined worlds, and he saw himself erased. No honor, no remembrance, no legacy. Then the whispers spoke clearly. They told him the emperor planned to abandon his sons, that the Great Crusade was merely a tool, that Horus was nothing more than a disposable weapon. They showed him half-truths, twisted but believable. They gave him a choice: accept death and be forgotten, or rise and save humanity from the Emperor's lies. When Horus awoke, he screamed. The ritual had worked. His body healed. The wound closed. His strength returned. But something fundamental had changed. The light in his eyes was dimmer. The warmth in his voice was colder. Erebus knelt before him, and Horus Lupercal, Warmaster of mankind, smiled. The most dangerous lies are not shouted. They are whispered, soft enough to sound like your own thoughts. Horus Lupercal returned to command a changed being. To his sons he appeared whole, strong, victorious. The Warmaster stood tall upon the bridge of the vengeful spirit, issuing orders with the same authority as before. But those who knew him best, who had fought beside him for decades, felt the difference. He listened more than he spoke. He smiled less. And when he looked upon the stars, there was calculation in his gaze. Horus began to question everything. Why had the Emperor withdrawn to Terra without explanation? Why were the Primarchs treated as tools rather than sons? Why was the imperial truth, denying gods and the warp, so fiercely enforced when Horus had seen what dwelled beyond reality? The dreams did not stop. Each night, visions returned, carefully guided, worlds burning in the Emperor's name, humanity chained beneath endless war. Horus himself remembered only as a traitor, or worse, not remembered at all. And always, the same promise echoed. You can change this. Erebus remained close, too close. He spoke gently of destiny, of freedom from lies. He framed rebellion not as treason, but as liberation. Horus resisted at first, clinging to his loyalty, but doubt is a seed, and Erebus watered it. The first test came quietly. Horus began altering campaign outcomes, subtle changes. Compliance achieved with less destruction. Administrators ignored. Orders from Terra delayed. Nothing openly treasonous. Just enough to feel right. Then came the Interrex, an advanced human civilization, technologically powerful, culturally enlightened. Most importantly, they coexisted peacefully with alien species. According to imperial law, this was heresy. But Horus saw something else. Hope. He met with the Interrex leadership in peace, marveling at their knowledge of the warp and their warnings of chaos. They spoke of ancient evils, of gods that fed on emotion, ambition, and pride. Gods Horus now suspected were real. The negotiations were going well, too well. Then Erebus stole the anathema from the Interrex vaults. Chaos erupted. The Interrex believed betrayal had come from Horus himself. Talks collapsed. War followed. A chance at coexistence was annihilated in bolter fire and orbital bombardment. Horus was furious, but the damage was done. Another lie reinforced. See? Peace is impossible. The Emperor's way is the only way, or your way. Horus withdrew further into himself. He began surrounding himself with those who shared his doubts, Primarchs who felt slighted, angry, or forgotten. Lorgar, whose faith had been crushed by the Emperor's humiliation. Fulgrim, whose pursuit of perfection had led him astray. Angron, broken and enslaved by rage. Mortarion, seething with hatred for tyranny. They did not yet know the truth, but they listened, and Horus was convincing. He spoke not of overthrowing the Emperor, but of correcting him, of freeing humanity from lies, of claiming the future they deserved. Still, one obstacle remained: the Emperor himself. Horus needed proof, something undeniable. That proof came from the warp. During a ritual, disguised as meditation, Horus was granted another vision, this one clearer, this one devastating. He saw the Emperor seated upon a golden throne, sustained by sacrifice, ruling as a god. He saw the Primarchs erased from history, their victories claimed by Terra, and he saw the future name given to him, Arch-Traitor. The vision broke him, not with rage, with grief. Horus wept alone in his chambers. For the first time, he allowed himself to believe the impossible. If the Emperor would become a god, then he must be stopped. The Warmaster made his decision, not in anger, not in madness, but in the cold certainty that only he could save mankind. The galaxy had not yet realized it, but the Horus Heresy had already begun. Horus Lupercal did not fall in a single moment. He rose, reborn in lies, crowned by darkness, and convinced he was saving humanity. Davin became sacred ground, not to the Imperium, not to humanity, but to Horus. It was the place where he had died and returned. The world where weakness had been burned away and replaced with clarity. At least that was how Horus saw it now. The serpent lodges that once repulsed him no longer felt alien. Their symbols whispered of destiny. Their rituals promised control, not submission, to the powers of the warp. Horus told himself he was not a servant. He was a master, and masters require followers. He began by reshaping the truth. The wound, he claimed, had shown him the Emperor's future tyranny. The Imperium was drifting toward godhood, deception, and endless sacrifice. The imperial truth was already dead. Terra just refused to admit it. Many resisted. Garviel Loken, once Horus's most loyal son, sensed the change immediately. Where Horus had once embodied honor, he now spoke in careful half-truths. Where he had inspired loyalty, he now demanded obedience. Loken questioned him. Horus smiled and answered gently, "Would you follow me to save mankind?" The question was a test. Some failed it. Others, like Ezekiel Abaddon, passed without hesitation. Abaddon saw strength in Horus's certainty. He believed in his Primarch not as a father, but as a leader willing to do what must be done. The sons of Horus began to fracture. Quietly. Those who believed remained close. Those who doubted were sent away, dispatched on distant missions, removed from the heart of command. Horus then reached outward, to the legions who felt betrayed by the Emperor. Lorgar knelt first. The word-bearers had already embraced the gods of the warp. Where Horus sought control, Lorgar offered devotion. He named Horus the Chosen of Chaos, not a slave, but a champion. The title disgusted Horus, but he accepted the power. Fulgrim followed, already corrupted by his pursuit of perfection. Mortarian's hatred of the Emperor's authoritarianism burned hot. Angren needed little convincing, only blood and vengeance. One by one, alliances formed, and Davin became the gathering place. There, Horus performed the final act of his transformation, a ritual not of healing, but of binding. The gods of chaos did not appear as monsters. They came as concepts: strength, freedom, truth, destiny. They promised Horus victory over the Emperor and a future where humanity would not kneel. Horus accepted their gifts, not as worship, as a bargain. The price was subtle. They did not take his body. They did not claim his mind. They took something far more dangerous: his doubt. From that moment on, Horus believed completely that he was right. The first open betrayal came soon after. Horus ordered 3 loyal legions, the Salamanders, Iron Hands, and Raven Guard, to muster at Istvan V, under the pretense of crushing a small rebellion. They trusted him. Why wouldn't they? He was the Warmaster. They arrived in force, prepared to purge traitors. Instead, they were surrounded. As orbital bombardment rained down, Legions once sworn to brotherhood turned their guns inward. Drop pods fell like meteors, not to reinforce, but to execute. Brother killed brother. Primarch fought Primarch. The massacre was absolute. Ferrus Manus died by Fulgrim's hand. Vulcan vanished into captivity. Corax barely escaped with shattered remnants of his legion. Horus watched from orbit, and he did not look away. The galaxy screamed, but Terra did not yet hear it. The lie still held. For now, there are wounds that never heal, not because they are deep, but because they were inflicted by those we trusted most. The massacre at Istvan V did more than shatter legions. It shattered faith. News of the betrayal spread through the Imperium like a psychic scream. Astropaths died mid-message. Entire fleets fell into confusion. Loyal commanders refused to believe the reports. Horus? A traitor? Impossible. But the evidence mounted. 3 loyal legions broken, a Primarch dead, whole systems falling silent. And at the center of it all stood the Warmaster. Horus Lupercal no longer hid his intentions. He declared the Emperor a liar and a tyrant. He named himself the savior of humanity. He claimed the Imperium must be reborn through fire. Some legions turned willingly. Others resisted and paid the price. The drop site massacre became the template for Horus's war. Deception first, annihilation second. Loyalist forces were isolated, outnumbered, and crushed before they could unite. On world after world, the traitor legions unleashed horrors the Imperium had never sanctioned. Daemons fought beside space marines. Warp storms swallowed fleets whole. Entire populations were sacrificed to fuel dark rituals. This was no longer a civil war. It was an apocalypse. Among the Loyalists, despair threatened to overwhelm resolve. Rogel Dorn fortified Terra with obsessive precision, knowing the Emperor's silence could no longer be questioned. Robout Guilliman began building a secondary empire in Ultramar, preparing for a future where Terra might fall. Sanguinius, angelic, doomed, felt the weight of prophecy pressing upon him. He sensed his own death approaching, and still he flew to Terra, determined to stand by the Emperor's side. And then there was Garviel Loken, once the heart of the sons of Horus, now a fugitive in his own legion. Loken had survived Istvan through sheer will, witnessing the truth of Horus's fall. He carried that truth like a burden. Loken saw what Horus had become, and mourned what he once was. The laughter was gone, the warmth extinguished. In its place stood a commander who spoke of destiny while slaughtering millions. Horus did not see himself as a villain. He saw himself as necessary. Each betrayal was justified, each death rationalized. The Emperor had abandoned his sons, so Horus would build something better. But the warp demanded more. The deeper the war dragged on, the more Horus relied on powers he swore he controlled. His flagship became a nexus of corruption. Time warped, reality bent, demons whispered openly in his halls, and slowly, his brothers began to notice. Fulgrim was lost entirely to madness. Angron became nothing but rage. Mortarion choked on bitterness. Lorgar knelt too eagerly. Horus had united them, but not controlled them. The gods were no longer content with whispers. They wanted Terra. The march toward the throne world began. Horus unleashed his fleets, burning a path through the Imperium's heart. Loyal worlds were annihilated to deny resources. Civilian populations were butchered to break morale. There would be no reconciliation, no forgiveness, only victory or extinction. As the traitor armada closed in on Sul, Horus stood alone on the vengeful spirit, staring at the distant light of his father's realm. For the first time since Davin, He hesitated, not because he doubted his cause, but because somewhere, buried beneath layers of lies and corruption, a son remembered being loved. And that memory hurt more than any blade. The Imperium did not fall all at once. It burned, world by world, soul by soul, until the stars themselves seemed to scream. The Horus Heresy was no longer a secret. It was a wildfire. From the eastern fringe to the galactic core, star systems vanished behind walls of flame. Astropathic choirs collapsed under the strain of transmitting horrors beyond human comprehension. Warp storms choked the void, isolating fleets, stranding worlds, and turning once stable routes into death traps. Humanity was being torn apart from the inside. Horus unleashed his war with ruthless efficiency. He understood the Imperium better than anyone, because he had helped build it. He knew which worlds mattered, which supply lines fed Terra, which systems could be sacrificed without slowing the Emperor's response. Forge worlds were shattered to deny weapons to loyalists. Agri-worlds were virus-bombed, condemning billions to starvation. Shrine worlds, once symbols of unity, were desecrated to break morale. And always, the traitor fleets moved closer to Sol. On Terra, Rogel Dorn watched the stars darken. He turned the throne world into a fortress beyond imagination. Planetary guns were repositioned. Defense platforms layered the void. Every approach route was mined, trapped, or sealed. But Dorn knew the truth. He labored in silence upon the Golden Throne, working on something vast and unseen. The Loyalists did not know whether he was preparing salvation or merely delaying annihilation. That uncertainty was poison. Meanwhile, Horus's own forces began to fracture under the strain of chaos. Demonic infestations spread unchecked. Time behaved unpredictably. Some ships emerged from the warp decades older. Others arrived before they had left. Discipline eroded. Only Horus held them together, and the gods knew it. They pressed harder, demanding devotion, sacrifice, blood. Horus gave them victories, but resisted complete submission. He still believed he was in control, that he could cast them aside once the Emperor fell. It was a lie they allowed him to believe. Across the galaxy, individual tragedies unfolded. Sanguinius fought a running war through the ruin storm, haunted by visions of his own death. Every battle cost him sons, but he never slowed. He knew where destiny led, and he flew toward it anyway. Vulcan endured torture and resurrection at the hands of Conrad Kurze, learning that immortality could be its own curse. Guilliman rallied broken legions and human fleets, building hope from ruins, refusing to surrender to despair. These acts did not stop Horus, but they slowed him. The Solar War tore fleets apart in apocalyptic engagements that lit the void like dying suns. The traitors paid dearly, but they pushed through. And then, they reached Terra. The siege of Terra began. Horus ordered the bombardment without hesitation. If humanity was to be saved, its heart would have to break first. When gods refuse to speak, men decide their own truths, and those truths can doom an entire species. Terra burned. Not all at once, not yet, but in slow, methodical agony. The skies were choked with ash and fire as the traitor fleets hammered the planet's defenses day after relentless day. Defense platforms shattered. Orbital docks vanished in nuclear fire. The void around Earth became a graveyard of shattered warships and drifting corpses. And still, the Emperor did not speak. He sat upon the Golden Throne, silent, distant, unreachable. To the Loyalists, this silence was unbearable. Rogel Dorn interpreted it as command through absence. If the Emperor would not guide them, then Terra itself would become his answer. Dorn hardened the palace into a fortress beyond reason. Walls layered upon walls, kill zones stacked with artillery, every corridor designed to drown the enemy in blood. Malkador the Sigillite understood more than most. He knew the Emperor was fighting a war no one else could see, holding back the warp itself, maintaining the fragile web of humanity's survival. But knowledge offered little comfort when the world was dying. Among the defenders, faith wavered. Some prayed to an emperor who denied godhood. Some cursed him for abandoning his sons. Some whispered that Horus might have been right. And far above the siege lines, aboard the vengeful spirit, Horus Lupercal watched. He felt Terra's pain like a pulse through his veins. The closer he came, the louder the warp roared in his mind. The gods pressed harder now, no longer content with subtlety. Finish it. Claim what is yours. Strike him down. Horus resisted. Barely. He had not come to destroy Terra, not completely. He wanted the Emperor broken, exposed, forced to admit the truth. Horus still believed, in some distant fragment of himself, that his father could be made to see reason. That illusion was dying. The siege dragged on for months. Loyalist blood soaked the palace grounds. Heroic last stands became daily occurrences. Entire regiments vanished, holding gates that would fall hours later. Sanguinius became a symbol. Where he fought, the line held. His wings burned against the smoke-choked sky, his blade cutting through traitors and demons alike. To the defenders, he was hope given form. To Horus, he was a reminder. The brother Horus loved most, and the one fate had marked for death. As the outer walls finally collapsed and traitor forces flooded into the palace, a sudden psychic shock tore through the battlefield. The Emperor moved, not physically, but in power. A psychic beacon flared across Terra, obliterating demonic entities and buying the Loyalists precious time. For a moment, it felt like salvation. For Horus, it was an insult. After years of silence, now the Emperor acted. Rage surged. The gods rejoiced. Horus made his final decision. He lowered the shields of the vengeful spirit. It was a challenge, a message spoken in silence across the warp. Come to me, Father. Face what you created. The Emperor understood. Gathering his remaining strength, he prepared a desperate gambit, a teleport strike, straight into the heart of the traitor flagship. With him went Sanguinius, Rogel Dorn, and a handful of the most loyal warriors left alive. This was not a battle plan. It was an ending. As they vanished in a flash of light, Terra held its breath. Horus stood waiting in the darkness of his throne room, armor crackling with warp energy, eyes burning with godlike power. The favored son, the silent father. At last, they would speak. Some victories cost more than defeat. Some deaths echo forever, and some battles are lost before the first blow is struck. The teleport strike scattered them. Reality screamed as the Emperor's psychic power tore through the warp, hurling his warriors into the depths of the vengeful spirit. Some materialized inside walls and died instantly. Others vanished, lost between moments. Only 3 emerged whole: the Emperor, Rogel Dorn, Sanguinius. They stood within the corrupted halls of Horus's flagship, a place where time twisted and shadows breathed. The air tasted of blood and ozone. Demonic whispers clawed at the mind. The Emperor said nothing. He did not need to. They advanced, cutting through warped corridors, through traitor Astartes and creatures that had never been born. With every step, the Emperor's presence burned the warp itself, forcing reality to obey. Then, they separated. A psychic surge tore Dorn away, hurling him into a sealed chamber where he fought alone against impossible odds. Sanguinius pressed on. He knew where this path led. At the heart of the flagship, Horus waited. The chamber was vast, part throne room, part cathedral, part nightmare. Warp light flickered across broken banners of the Imperium. At its center stood Horus Lupercal, towering, radiant with stolen godhood. For a moment, they simply looked at each other, brother to brother. Horus spoke first, not with rage, but with sorrow. He told Sanguinius it did not have to end this way, that the Emperor had lied, that the Imperium could still be saved, together. Sanguinius listened, and then he refused. He saw the truth Horus could not, that chaos had already won its price, that whatever noble intentions once existed were buried beneath corruption and pride. Sanguinius drew his blade. I will not let you destroy Father. The fight was beautiful, and it was hopeless. Sanguinius fought with the fury of an angel, every strike a defiance of fate itself. He wounded Horus again and again, cutting through warp-fueled defenses, reminding the Warmaster of what he once was. For a heartbeat, Horus hesitated. Then the gods screamed. They flooded Horus with power. Reality bent, time slowed. Horus struck. The blow shattered Sanguinius's guard, crushed his wings, and drove him to his knees. Still, Sanguinius fought, bloodied, broken, unyielding. In the end, Horus killed him. The angel fell. His death sent a psychic shockwave across Terra. Defenders screamed as hope itself seemed to die. The Emperor felt it, felt the loss of his most loyal son, and for the first time in centuries, he felt grief. Moments later, the Emperor arrived. He saw Sanguinius's broken body, and something in him hardened. The Emperor and Horus faced each other at last, father and son, creator and creation. They spoke, not with words, but with memories, of laughter, of victories, of trust broken beyond repair. Horus attacked. The battle that followed shattered the flagship. Gods clashed in mortal form. The Emperor held back at first, unwilling, unable to destroy his favored son. That hesitation cost him dearly. Horus struck him down. A final, cruel blow broke the Emperor's body and soul. Only then did the Emperor understand. Horus was gone, and mercy would doom humanity. Drawing upon the last of his strength, the Emperor rose and unleashed his full power. Horus screamed as the warp abandoned him. In a single, blinding moment, Horus Lupercal ceased to exist. The war ended, but peace never came. Because what died that day was not a traitor. It was hope itself. Horus Lupercal was gone. Not defeated, not imprisoned, erased. There was no soul left to judge, no spirit to redeem. The gods of chaos howled in fury as their chosen champion was unmade, stripped from existence by the one being who had loved him most. The vengeful spirit fell silent. Its warp-fueled madness collapsed inward, reality snapping back into place with violent finality. Demons screamed as they were banished. Traitor space marines froze in confusion, suddenly cut off from the power that had sustained them. Across Terra, the guns fell quiet. The siege was over, but victory came too late. Rogel Dorn found the Emperor's broken body amid the ruins of the flagship. His golden armor was shattered, his flesh burned and torn beyond mortal healing. The being who had conquered the galaxy lay dying, held together only by will. Dorn wept, not as a Primarch, but as a son. They carried the Emperor back to Terra in solemn silence. The traitor fleets, leaderless and fractured, began to retreat. Some fled into the warp, Others turned on each other. The Horus Heresy ended not with celebration, but with exhaustion and grief. On Terra, Malcador the Sigillite made the final sacrifice. To save the Emperor, to preserve humanity's last chance, Malcador took his place upon the Golden Throne, holding back the warp long enough for the Emperor to be installed. The effort destroyed him. His body turned to ash. His soul burned away. The Emperor was entombed, not crowned. Bound to the Golden Throne, sustained by machines and sacrifice, unable to speak or move. Not dead, not alive. A god in all but name. The very fate Horus had feared. Sanguinius was returned to his sons, his broken form laid to rest with reverence and sorrow. His death became legend, his sacrifice a symbol of loyalty beyond reason. The traitor Primarchs scattered. Some vanished into the eye of terror. Some embraced demonhood. Some were hunted into myth. But the damage was done. The Imperium rebuilt, not as a dream of unity, but as a fortress of paranoia and faith. Religion replaced truth. Fear replaced hope. Endless war became the only constant. The Emperor's vision was preserved, but twisted. And Horus? Horus became a warning, a name spoken with hatred and sorrow, a symbol of betrayal, a monster in the history books. Few remembered the truth, that he had been brave, that he had been loved, that he had once believed he was saving humanity. The tragedy of Horus Lupercal was not that he fell. It was that his fall was inevitable, engineered by silence, pride, and gods that fed on good intentions. The